So right now it's April 2022 and scalpers want silly money for a Raspberry Pi. Even something like the Raspberry Pi Zero2 wireless, or Zero2, whatever it's called, out of stock everywhere. Why? So I turned to the Orange Pi. This is the Orange Pi Zero2W or Zero-W2, something like that. It cost me $24 on AliExpress. It took about 2 weeks to come in. And it's marketed as more or less a competitor to the aforementioned Raspberry Pi Zero2W. This guy has, as you can see, a wireless antenna, so we have onboard Wi-Fi, quad-core Cortex, and a gig of RAM. So more than enough juice to keep up with MainsailOS and Klipper. But I wanted to make this video because I couldn't find great documentation for specific implementation on this Orange Pi. There is a very good MainsailOS page for manual installation. However, in doing so, I found that there were a couple extra steps and tricks in there that it would have not been obvious. It took me a couple attempts and screw-ups to kind of get through it, so that's why I'm making this video, is to kind of just capture it. And hopefully a way that's easy to understand. I'm going to go ahead and combine that online documentation from Mainsail along with kind of the little extra steps that I found along the way. So this is I call it my salvage title, Ender 3. It was an Amazon returns item, and it's got Klipper itself flashed on here. I just finished a PID tune. And I have MainsailOS running off of this. You can see, and I just have this old Fire tablet, and everything is going along nicely. You can see here it is connected, and I want to point out a few things first. Elephants in the room, so to speak. One, this is not mounted properly. I know. I printed this case a little bit ago, and I'm waiting for a few things to come in. Like, I'm going to connect a couple things to these pins here, like a USB webcam, before I mount it. The other one is the power supply situation. So really you should have at least, I want to say it's 2 or 3 amps rated 5-volt supply, USB-C. And all I have here is just a phone charger plugged into my server's UPS, so this is not a proper power supply, but it's coming in tomorrow and I'll do it then. But for right now, this has worked fine just for getting it set up, and obviously all functions are working. But so don't crucify me for that. It is coming. I just wanted to kind of show that it works. So with that aside, I'm going to go ahead. I might take a couple more clips to show some specific setup stuff, and then we'll go over to the computer and I'll record my screen. Okay, so before I go over there, physical installation. So it should be obvious that you're going to need to have a USB connection to your printer. On my Ender 3, it just goes in, it's a micro USB, pretty standard. However, you'll see that I have this little patch in the middle. This is heat shrink tubing. And what I did was I actually used some wire strippers, to open the insulation, and then I just used my little flesh cutters to snip the red wire, which is the 5-volt. So the ground and then the 2 data wires are still continuous. However, the 5-volt wire is cut, and I cut about 1 millimeter or so out of it. That way that when the Pi is powered, it doesn't backfeed the screen, and vice versa. It kind of ends up powering the main board through the USB port. So that's recommended. It took a few seconds, nothing really that big of a deal. You can also tape over the pin. That's widely documented online if you are curious about it. I'm not going to go into it here, but I would say this is a smart move, and everything is still working just fine, as you can see. I don't think there's much else besides, so I have here, so in here running right now is a 32 gig micro SD card, and as you can see it's running fine, but for this video I'm just going to use this spare 8 gigabyte card that was included with the Ender 3 just to show you a fresh installation, and we'll kind of go through it together. Computer, I've got the micro SD card put in, and let's talk about software that we're going to need to do this. So as you can see, I'm actually using a Mac, but if you're on Windows or Linux, nothing I'm doing with a Mac is going to, be anything unique, so you should be able to figure out a way to do this using your favorite software or equivalents. But the first piece of software that I'm going to be talking about is Balena Etcher. You've probably heard of it. It's going to work just fine for us, and we'll come back to that later. Second piece of software is your favorite SSH client. So I'm using CyberDuck on Mac, but I know that WinSCP is another good one that works just fine. So again, use your favorite, but CyberDuck, I've been using that. It's awesome. We're also going to need, what was the other one? That might have been it, to be honest. Oh, text editor. So yeah, you're going to have a text editor on your computer, but if you're on a Mac, you need to go up here to Text Edit, Preferences, and then there's a couple things you need to change, otherwise it's going to save it in some kind of special encoding format. You need to uncheck smart quotes, and you're also going to need to change, where was it? Sorry guys, it's been a couple days, but there was, yeah, change this, here it is. Instead of rich text, change it to plain text. That way whenever you save any kind of file, maybe it's a CFG file or a Python script, it's not going to add some funky, weird encoding characters and end up corrupting it. So I think that's pretty much it. So I've gone ahead, I just have this blank SD card in here that I pulled out of my other Ender 3. It's an 8 gig card. Really, you should use the best card that you have. Something like 32 gigs is probably ideal. You can use 8 gigs or 16. However, over time, as data is read and written to it, it's going to be read and written over the same sectors many, many times, and it'll just wear the card out faster. So if you have a bigger card to start with, within reason, the card's actually going to last longer. And I'm not going to go through picking an SD card because that's non-unique to what we're talking about today. Let's go into downloads. So the main thing we're going to be downloading today is Armbian. Now you might be thinking, now hold on, Michael. You can just download the MainsailOS image right from Mainsail themselves, or better yet, if you go into the Raspberry Pi imager, you can just go right in here and look, MainsailOS. Yeah, not only can I download it here, but look, there's my SD card. So what's the problem? What's so complicated about that? It seems like it just could be a couple steps. Well, that's where I realized that it's actually not that easy. And in fact, I did try this, and I went through all this and blah, 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 and it wouldn't boot. I'm not an expert on, I guess, like microcontrollers, SBCs, and Linux distributions, but there was something where it was incompatible, and the Orange Pi wouldn't even boot. In fact, the little status LED wouldn't even show up. It was just off. It wouldn't even show me a red LED. Nothing at all. So you might think, okay, well, Balena Etcher, I'll just go ahead and I'll find the MainsailOS file and I'll just flash it that way. No, same thing. So the way that we get around that is we first have to install Armbian onto the Orange Pi and then manually install Klipper and Mainsail and Moonraker onto that using the documentation with some amendments. Another thing, you might be thinking, oh, well, Michael, I saw online on the Orange Pi documentation that you can't run Armbian on the Orange Pi Zero2. And you're right. 2 years ago you were right. However, Armbian has been released. They've released a new version in the last, I don't know, 6 months to a year, which now fully supports it. And that's what I have open in this tab. So if you just Google Armbian Orange Pi 02, or whatever you're using, you'll come up to this page. And I don't want to put links in the description like everybody else does, because what if a couple years from now that link's broken? Now you can't find it. So I'd rather just show you how to get to it. That way it's a little bit more future-proof. Anyway, at the time of this video, you have these two options here, Bullseye and Focal. I downloaded both, and I'm using Bullseye. It's been stable. That's what I'm running right now, so that's what I'm going to use. But you can just go ahead and download it right from Armbian's website. Then when you've done that, next thing we're going to do is go ahead and flash from file. Now I've got, this is Bullseye and this is Focal here. I'm just going to choose Bullseye. And then at this point it's really no different than flashing anything else. So let's go ahead and do that. And then I'll go ahead and come back when that's done. let that do its thing. Alright, so we have our fully flashed micro SD card here now, and it's time to put it back in the orange Pi. And this is really nothing exotic. Go ahead and just pop that guy in, just like that. And sorry for the mess. All I have right here is just a USB-C cable to USB-A. I'm going to just plug this into a USB charger. Having a proper power supply cable is probably the best thing to do, but this is just what I have right now. What we're going to have to do, though, to get this hooked up and online is to actually, I'm going to go up here to my router and plug it in. So there's a gigabit Ethernet port on the back of it. I'm just going to do that. So let me first start by getting this plugged in. I apologize for the fumbling around. I'm trying to do this with a shaky cam cell phone set up here. You get what you pay for on my videos. Come on, just plug that. There we go. So you can see our little red LED is on. Again, I mentioned that when I had the MainsailOS flashed right to the SD card, I wouldn't even get any LED at all. So this is a good sign. That means that there are comms to the micro SD card, and it's at least registering it as being somewhat valid. So I'm going to go ahead and move this up here, and then conveniently, I already have an Ethernet cable on the back of my router, just ready to plug in. So pardon the fumbling about. I'm going to go ahead and plug this in, and then I'll see you back at the computer. I've pulled up my router here, so yours is probably going to look different than mine. Hopefully you can figure out how to get into your router and view the devices on your network. So I can see this Orange Pi Zero2, which is the default host name for the Orange Pi Zero2. And I can see the IP address that's been assigned. Now granted, this is over the Ethernet. So later on when we're on the Wi-Fi MAC address, this could be different, but for right now this is just fine. This is perfect. Really all I'm going to do is go ahead and just copy that and go into WinSCP, or CyberDuck for me, probably WinSCP for you if you're on Windows, and do Open Connection. I'm going to go ahead and change this from FTP to SFTP, which is SSH server. Well, that's just going to be our IP address that we got from our router. And username is going to be root. And then the password is just 1234 by default. We do this, I get this little warning. That's alright. So this is what it looks like. If I select this to here, now I can see the whole file system structure. But really what I want to do is actually get into a terminal and do a shell. So in CyberDuck, there's simply a button for it there. And it's going to come up and immediately ask for the password. So it's the same one, 1234. So it's going to ask us for a new password. So I'll just think of something generic for now. I don't see if it lets me just do password. Damn it. Alright. I'll do something different. I apologize, guys, by the way. If this video drags on just from me kind of fumbling my way through it, I apologize. This is my second time doing this. The first time was the first time that I got it to work. So anyway, the next step here is it's going to ask us a default system command shell. I'm just going to do 1 for bash. Please provide a username. Now, this is something that I kind of realized is somewhat important. When you're setting up everything else later from the Mainsail documentation and you're just copying and pasting all the crap on their website, a lot of it is referencing a username named Pi. So if you choose something different now, you're going to end up having to go back and really make sure that you, when you copy and paste those commands, that you're going back and changing the username every time. And if you miss it one time, you could be chasing your tail later. So for the sake of simplicity, I highly recommend you just choose Pi. Let's give him a password. And the real name, I'm just going to make it the exact same, just Pi, lowercase. For some reason, this did it to me last time too, where it says internet connection was not detected. The fact that we're on a SSH shell over the internet connection has determined that that could possibly not be true. But we're going to go ahead and connect over wireless. It's a good chance to go ahead and set this up. So this is nice. It actually, it's nice to see that the Orange Pi Zero has decent range, because a lot of these are my neighbors' networks. So I'm just going to go in, connect to my my server Pi-hole cleansed wireless here, and then go ahead and do quit. We'll go ahead and just do yes to this. It's going to ask me localization info. I'm in the US. I'm just going to do English. This takes a second. And I will go ahead and cut the video later on when I get to some of these steps where it does actually take, you know, more than 30 seconds to finish any one command, just so we're not just sitting there quietly wasting time. This should just be just a second. There we go. I'm just going to go ahead and do clear. I like to, you're going to see me do that a lot, where I just type clear to just kind of bring everything back to a blank slate. The next command is, I just do this because I think it's nice to do, is ntmui. Just type that in just like that. Sorry, it's nmtui. I can never remember what it is. And this is our network manager. So when I do edit a connection, I can see that I have these two. This is the wireless that we set up a little bit ago, so it's good just to confirm that you are indeed connected and nothing went wrong. But also, set system host name. So we talked about how the default name was that. I'm going to make this host name, we'll call it like Klipper test. Right on. Okay, set. Now from here, what I recommend the first thing you do is do apt update. And then after this is done, we're going to run apt upgrade. So these each take a couple minutes, so I am going to cut the video, but I'm going to go ahead and run this first. This is going to go right through the Armbian repositories, and it's going to just essentially work out what all is not up to date and what's needed. And then when we do the apt upgrade command right after this, it's actually going to implement all that, right? So I'm going to stop the video here because this will be a few minutes, but I will see you when that's done. Gone ahead and run its course. So this is what you should be left with, which was, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes of it just updating itself. So again, that was apt update. And then when that was done, it's apt upgrade. So I'm going to go ahead and just do clear. And then what I'm going to do now is actually go ahead and just power off the Pi, unplug it from the Ethernet cable that I showed you earlier, and boot it back up purely off of the wireless, and then we'll come back. And this is again my router interface. Yours is again going to be a little bit different, probably, unless you're also using Untangle. And what I see here now is Klipper test under the devices that are on my wireless network. That means that everything worked fine, it's on the Wi-Fi, and it has a new IP address. So this time it's .110, and this is a good chance to assign it a static IP address. You can do this, I guess, like through the Armbian operating system itself. However, to me, the cleanest option is just to do it from your router. So again, I have this static DHCP entry page here. I've got a couple machines, and then at the very bottom you can see I've just added Klipper Ender 3. I've given it .110 at the very end. Indeed, this matches what we see here. So now the next step is to go back into our SSH client, and this is going to be where we spend most of our time, and open a connection. This time it's going to be .110, root, and then it's going to be the new password because we just changed that. And it should bring us right in. So it should just be like last time where everything is more or less the same. We can open up a shell, and let's go ahead and log in to our shell. And here we are. Okay, so what we want to do next is go ahead and start getting, I think the first part of it is actually the Klipper install, so let's head over and pull up the documentation. So this video is about MainsailOS, and as you can see, I've done quite a bit of Googling on how to get this installed. We'll just go ahead and find the manual installation page. So this is the manual setup, the rocky road for the daring. I guess that's going to be us in it. So anyway, let's go ahead and start off with the operating system. We're already up to date. It's recommended to use a clean Raspberry Pi OS. Well, that would be absolutely ideal. I agree with you completely if we didn't have scalpers that made us resort to clones, right? So there are going to be a few differences, and this is kind of where we're going to start to see them. So we've already done this where we've already done a sudo apt update and upgrade, so we can ignore this first part. However, let's go ahead and do this next one. Just going to go ahead and simply copy and paste this in here. The sudo part, I mean, what happened was my screen recording software decided to cut it off, and I got 5 or 10 minutes down the road before I realized it. We got that part done. That first command, right? It asked us to install this, unzip. The next part is this Python 3-version. I think you'll find that if you do run this with Bullseye and later, it's fine, so don't bother. However, this is a critical one here. This is a lot of dependencies for Klipper. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. I'm going to do a text editor notepad instance and paste it. There are two things here that are going to give you a problem on an Orange Pi or Armbian environment. One is libusb, and the other one is libusb dev. I'll show you why, right? So if I go ahead and just run the full command, this is a copy and paste of what I just had a second ago. It's going to come back and tell us that there was some kind of problem where it couldn't locate this package, and in fact if it was able to get past that, it would give us the same error for libusb dev. So the way around that is first you're going to type this in, apt install and then libusb 1.0, but if you notice on this one it just ends at 1.0. We're going to add a -0 at the end of it. Now I've already installed this because, well, my screen recording software cut out on me, so it's going to tell me nothing was installed because it was already there. The second one is libusb-dev. So again, I'm going to do something similar where I just add -dev at the very end of it. We can run that. Right, so that's already done. So what I'm going to do now is go back to my notepad here and just delete those two out of this big long list of dependencies. So I deleted libusb, and then up here I'm going to just delete libusb dev. I'm going to go ahead and just copy the rest, slap it in, and then when we run that, it's going to do its thing. Now I already did this, again, after my screen recording software kind of clocked out, so I'm going to end the video here, and we will come back in just a second. We'll be looking at a screen like this, where everything followed through to the very end. So, this is a step that I didn't see in the guide that I realized is 100% important. Absolutely essential. So, we need to switch from the root user to the Pi user, because the rest of these steps are in the Python environment. I don't know, I'm probably getting that wrong, but all you have to know is that this is important. We're going to do sudo -u and then pi, which is our username. If you use a different username besides pi, obviously you would just make it to match that, and then type bash. When we do this, as you can see, we are now pi at Klipper test. So everything we're doing now will be relative to this user account. Right, so we've done this here. Now we're going to go ahead and just change directory in to, I guess, like our default, and then run this git clone, and then we're going to essentially copy the Klipper repository. So we'll go ahead and do that. Boom. And then paste that command. That'll take a second. It's just going to get all the Klipper source files, and we'll go ahead and kind of just prepare ourselves. So after that, we're going to initialize the Python virtual environment and install the Python dependencies. So we'll get that next command ready. I can't remember how long this takes. Okay, not that long. Same thing, and then we'll paste that next command. Now some of these, this one is pretty quick, if I remember right. This next one, though, I do believe is a few minutes, so I'm gonna see how long it takes, but I might stop the video if it's more than a few seconds. You can just ignore that yellow text warning. It didn't seem to impact when I did it the last time. We'll let this do its thing. While it's doing that, let's look at the next section. Configuration and startup service. After Klipper is installed, we need to create a startup script to do this. So, let's see if I need to stop the video or not. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, and then we'll come back. Let's go ahead and, whoops, clear that. So now we're going to go ahead and edit this file. So Nano is essentially like a terminal text editor if you aren't familiar with it. So when we paste this in, it's going to more or less be a text editor. Okay. Enter our password. So in here, it's a little bit janky, but we're just going to copy all of this down to here. Copy, and then just paste. I'm going to do Control X so you can see it at the bottom here to exit. Save modified buffer. We're going to say Y for yes. Enter. That's that. We can go back. Sometimes I like to double check where I'll just press the up arrow to go back to the last command that I ran. And sure enough, it's all still there just as we pasted it. So Control X again to come back. Right on. So at this point, a lot of this is just copying and pasting commands. So I'm just going to blow through these. Great, that seemed to work. These four. Boom. And I apologize. I don't want to fill the video with just you guys watching me copy and paste stuff, but unfortunately, you're going to find that this is a good percentage of this installation process, which is good because it's better than having to figure out all of these on your own. So now your config is in place. Restart Klipper with this command. Let's go ahead and do that now. Right. Button, and then we're on this Moonraker installation page. So it's more or less another thing of installing dependencies, so I'm just going to copy and paste that whole line. And I don't remember there being a problem with this, but if there is, you're along for the ride. And this may take a few seconds, so this could be another one of those times where I stop the video. Do yes to continue. Yeah, we'll come back in a second. So that finished up. There were no problems with it. Next thing we're going to do is, this is going to be analogous to the Klipper stuff where we're going to first start with cloning the repository. So again, we're going to come out with this cd change directory command and then clone. Shouldn't take but a second. And then after that's done, we'll start off, it's going to, again, you're going to see a lot of similarities. All right. And then we'll just paste that one. That one's quick. And then here's another one where it'll take a couple minutes. So let's get that out of the way. See you in a minute. All right, so that's finished up. Let's go ahead and clear. Now this next part is, I mean, it says it's important, and it is. So this is the configuration file for Moonraker. Let's go ahead and get into it here. So here's the nano command, where we're going to get into our little terminal text editor, and then insert the following part. And then we're going to go back and adjust this as needed. And you'll see why. So it's all pasted in. But here's this trusted clients part is extremely important. So I'll let you read it on your own time. But what you need to know is that unless you set this up right, you'll never have access to MainsailOS through the web browser, and in fact, none of your devices will. So you need to know what your IP address space is. So I think for a lot of routers, it's going to be this here. This is kind of like, you know, if you have like a Comcast or AT&T router or whatever country you live in, this seems to be pretty much standard. This is the most common one. For me, I have a subnet where I'm in the 10.0.1.x space. So as you can see on all my devices, that's the case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here underneath trusted clients, and I'm going to just change. I don't need all of these rows. It's also not really hurting anything, I guess. So 1.2.168.0.0, I'm going to change that to 1.0 because I do have on my Proxmox setup a lot of my, I am in this address space here with a 1.x. So I do want to be able to get into this from my other VLAN. So I'm going to do 1.0, and then 24 is the default. I mean, I don't know why yours would not be 24 for most networks. And then I'll just change this other one here, 10.0. So again, mine was 1.x, so 1.0, 24. And that should be that. I'll do Control X, save buffer, yes. And if you want to learn more about that, I encourage you to go and look it up. I'm not going to go into it here, but it's no different than any other Moonraker installation. So just be very aware of that. They aren't joking around when they say that it's important. Fire emoji, fire emoji. So pay attention. And if you're not sure, figure it out. This isn't that hard to find. And do more copying and pasting. So now we're going to go in, and it's another one of those text editor kind of things. We go in and we're just simply going to paste this in. No big deal. Control X, yes, save. And this is another one of those things where, remember we talked about using pi as the username? If you didn't do that, and you're going to see this same little box a couple places, you are going to have to go through and deal with that. So now we're going to just go ahead and kind of like finish the Moonraker setup, just configuring it to start. At this point, let's go ahead and start the service with this command. And this will be the kind of the moment of truth. We'll be doing it live. So theoretically now, we should be able to get into our Moonraker like through the web browser, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just paste that in, replacing printer IP with, ours was 10.0.1.110. And here we are. Okay, so it's doing something. Now there's a couple, you know, it's saying that there's a couple things wrong. It's complaining about something. But the point is that it did work. And Moonraker is running, and it's talking to the web browser. So our trusted client section that we talked about a second ago is working. Obviously, we're here now, aren't we? So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, and we'll come back. So it says if everything was set up successfully, a message like this should appear. Unfortunately, ours does not say printer is ready. Ours says error for the state, but no matter. We'll just work through it. Now we're into installing Mainsail, which is, I mean, a lot more copying and pasting. So let's go ahead and kick off with this one. Okay. It's probably going to ask us to confirm. Yes. And then this is just copying and pasting these three commands. Can't remember how long this one took to install, but it looks like it's not going to be much longer. Cool. Yeah, just knock these three out. Whoops. Okay, and then we're going to have to go into each of these three files that we just created and populate them with the contents of these next text boxes. So we'll start with this one, the upstreams.conf file. Go ahead and just put all of this in. Oops. Sorry guys, I'm on a trackpad right now. Dude. Save it. And then we're going to go to this one. Sorry if I'm going kind of fast, but none of this is really anything exotic. And then lastly, this one. Come on. Okay. All right. Go ahead and just clean this up. Now down here, guess what? You guessed it. More copying and pasting. Let's go through line by line. One of these somewhere, I'm trying to remember which one it was, where I needed to add a pseudo in front of it. For some reason. So when we get there, we'll find it together. So this is Nginx, which is a reverse proxy. So now we should be able to just access it without that fancy address from last time. So, okay, let's just reload this page. Okay, so it still works, which is, I think, the intent of that. So that means that if that still works and it looks just like before, then you didn't screw it up. That's great. So now it's a matter of installing Mainsail. So let's go ahead and kick that off. Good. And then we'll do this. And while that's downloading, I'll see you in a minute. Oh, actually, that was really fast. Okay, so now it should be possible to open the interface using just the IP. So recall we had to type all this in here, this printer info, blah, blah, blah. So if we just type the IP, hello, Mainsail. Pretty much done. There are a few things that we'll come back to in just a few minutes, but I want to address the elephant in the room, which is the fact that we have an all caps error here in our little tab, and all manner of Moonraker warnings, Clippy state error. We even have complaints over here. So don't worry about this though, because at this point it's just a simple matter of getting it set up, and it's no different than if you had done this on a Raspberry Pi. So all of the online resources and help and guidance documentation is going to apply to you now. We've kind of gotten past the weird parts that are unique to the fact that you used an Orange Pi instead of a Raspberry Pi. Let's go ahead and just start with a CFG. So printer.cfg is really kind of the heart of it, and as you can see, ours is just empty. So here's what you should do. Now I'm doing this on an Ender 3, but you can kind of use the same process on whatever printer you have. So I just googled Klipper repository, and then I'm just going to go to the GitHub page. When we get here, I'm going to go into this config folder, and then there's going to be all these example CFG files. And I'm going to scroll down. So mine is an Ender 3, but it has the 32-bit 4.2.2 mainboard. So did I scroll past it? No. So Ender 3, there's 2018. Mine isn't a Pro, but it has the same mainboard. So I'm just going to go ahead, come in here, copy all this, just as a starting point. A lot of it is going to change later, and just slap that in. Save and restart. So of course it's not connected. I haven't yet plugged it into my physical, micro USB on the printer yet. So that's totally normal that it's not gonna know what's going on. But that's really the intent of it. You can click this little arrow here. You can see that it's now registering all of this. It's up to date. And yeah, guys, at this point it's pretty much a normal installation. But I will go ahead and walk through very briefly on setting up the bin file or the hex file. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and reference the Klipper installation documentation. So if we go just to this page here, now bear in mind that on the Klipper documentation page, at least at the time of this video, it seemed to pretty much all be revolving around Octopi, Octoprint, but we are going to salvage a few of the commands here. So in this section that's called Building and Flashing the Microcontroller, you're going to see these two commands. So we're going to go back into our terminal and just go ahead and get into that directory. If it gives you a problem, just verify that you have it. So under Home, Pi, and there should be a folder called Klipper. I did do an installation where the Klipper folder was actually outside of the Pi in the home directory. It was in the same directory structure as bin boot dev, so it was somewhere like down here. Just cd into that one instead, and you'll be fine. Anyway, once we're in there, this next command, make menu config, let's do that. And then this should be kind of where we can set up our firmware that we're actually going to physically flash to the printer. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because, again, there's already a lot of videos on this. But, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's change this. So mine is a SMT32. F103 is correct. 28 kilobit bootloader. I'm on 32-bit. Creality mainboard, and then serial, and then that's that. I think we can just go ahead and do quit, save configuration, yes, and then we can just type make, and this will just take a second. Let's see if my screen recorder software doesn't cut out on me. It seems to last about 2.5 minutes. That's why the clips have been about that long for this entire video. I apologize for that, and hence why there's some cut-offs and cut-ins. But you gotta piss with the cock you got. So I think it's pretty much wrapping up now when it's doing that ELF file. Right, so you can see now it's this Klipper.bin is the output. If you had done a 8-bit Creality board, I think it's a .hex file. And in any case, let's go ahead and go back to our SSH client, and I'm going to click refresh, and then under Klipper, there's this folder called out, and sure enough, Klipper.bin. Now what we can do is just click download, and this is going to just download it right into my onto my computer, and I can put this on my SD card and flash it, and then we're in business. After that, guys, you can just plug everything in, boot it all up, and welcome to Klipper.